Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go, man. Hunt the ball. Let's go, family on three. 1, 2, 3, family.
Hello, football family. Welcome into Huddle It Up Films NFL Draft Barbecue. Big board questions. Today, favorite guest of the program, Gabe Ferguson's back on. See him on some of my panels. Work with him with Ken. We've crossed paths. One of the first people to reach out to me, Gabe, was you and Jordan, by the way. So I appreciate that warm welcome. Not too long ago, my friend. And just wanted to say thanks so much for coming by and ask you to tell people about the Situation Room and your Twitter and all that stuff here at the beginning.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I think this is my second or third time on here. It's been a blast every single time. It's great talking about Ravens. You mentioned the Situation Room. It's a podcast I do with my friend Jordan Coe. We are at filmstudybaltimore.com with Ken McCusick, and after each football game, weeks 1 through 17, we kind of break down, plays that happened that we found to be really interesting from kind of an X and O's perspective. Some of the unique kind of plays that were interesting or stood out to us as big, important. Whether it's a first down conversion or some type of cool sequence of plays that we saw. So we really like to get into it and have a fun conversation, talk about the different kind of in-depth conversations that a lot of people are really into. So it's off season, so we're a little quiet right now, but once the season gets ramped up, we'll be having regular podcasts again. Yeah, and then you can follow me on Twitter. Twitter at Gabe Fergie. I should have put it up here. I forgot to. But it's I'm pretty active on Twitter. I like to have conversations with people. I really love talking Ravens, love talking football. So hit me up. You can just at me or you can DM me if you want to have a conversation anytime.
Yep, Gabe, active on Twitter for sure. Somebody that I communicate with, away from the program, somebody I respect a lot. And the Situation Room, Gabe, is something that I do tune into even during the season when I'm busy because I love the X's and O's part. And, I'm more focused on player performance. So I know you guys are looking at it from we're all Ravens fans, but from a slightly different perspective. And I get a lot out of that. And the people that watch the show, I highly recommend, especially during the season when they're putting out regular shows. Check out the Situation Room. It'll be important parts of the game, like Gabe said, that, to break down and what happened. And usually those are the differences in that game and how it comes out. So, yeah, great show over at the Situation Room. So, Dr. Ferguson. Now, we're going to take our football hats off for a second. We're talking to Dr. Ferguson, okay? This man is got a major in rocket scientry from what I imagine of you, Gabe. I know you're a very well-schooled man, and I want to know what the doctor is like at a barbecue. So whether you're hosting or whether you're going to it, I'm not going to give the whole big setup because I know you've seen the show. What's Gabe at a barbecue like, man?
I'm a person who likes to be at the barbecue itself. I like to be doing some of the grilling. I have a way that I like to prepare food. I like to smoke meats. So I like to. It's a kind of a whole day affair when you're smoking meat. So get up early in the morning, get all the seasoning on it, get the rub on it, put it on the smoker, let it go for hours at a time. Then it comes out. It's amazing. I'll do some grilling, some steaks, some hamburgers, all the good stuff. I'm a big fan of doing all that on the grill outside. It's a great time. When you're around people, talking about football, talking about family, talking about whatever it is you want to do. Maybe have a cold one or a glass of wine. I like to do that as well. So, I really enjoy doing that. I like hanging out with people. So, and the barbecue is a great place to do that.
All right, so that was a very thorough description, more thorough than I usually get, so I appreciate that. So I have to make my follow-up question harder. What about the music, Gabe? What are we listening to then, bro?
Well, I'm kind of a music snob kind of person. I like the things I like. I'm very much into the indie alt rock kind of scene. That's my vibe. I've listened to that type of music my entire life. It's I'll listen to other things too, but that's kind of like if I'm person put on the tunes, it's going to be like some old school alt music, maybe some Radiohead, some Muse, some good stuff like that. That's my jam.
Gabe, that's no shocker because we're both from Baltimore, kind of the same age. You got me on the the youth over there. So I'm a little jealous, but yeah, man, let's get like alt rock, gangster rap, hip hop from that era, all of it, man. Even like your more poppy stuff. You just give me some old school stuff and I'll be happy. And if I get that Liquid Courage, Coach Evans mentioned that the other day. Yeah, I might make a fool out of myself and the in the cell phone era. So I try to stay away from that stuff. I have children and I don't record them doing stupid stuff and post it all over the internet. Oh, look how awesome they are. So I expect that they keep their phones in their pocket and not embarrass dad, Gabe. I mean, that sounds fair, right?
Oh, that's completely fair. Would not want to embarrass dad, so dad has to be careful sometimes, but
Yeah,
definitely would not want to film that.
we had a pinata and moonshine connection about 10 years ago. Now that was some good old fashioned fun. You want to see somebody blindfolded spun around in a pinata with some moonshine somebody brought from like his uncle's house or something from the country out in Virginia or West Virginia or wherever the heck it was from. So yeah, got a little wild at one of our barbecues like that. And luckily the only recording was not circulated. It wasn't me being the fool with that one. I was the guy screaming, "Oh man, he's going to kill somebody!" Because he keeps spinning around the bat, man. Like, oh, he didn't know where he was going. Fell, his glasses fell off, his shoe came. He was wearing slipper came off. Good old fashioned time. How's it going, Eric Cuppet? Just want to say that out loud, Gabe. Don't know Eric, but just giving him a shout out. So, Gabe, let's get down to business, man. A lot of players. I know you've been digging into the edge class heavily, and but there's a player you wanted to talk about that wasn't on the edge, a controversial figure as far as how valuable is he? Everybody sees him at the top of the draft, but
Yeah,
is he going to fall compared to all these other premium positions? So I guess you know who I'm talking about, Gabe.
absolutely. So I'm wearing a Ed Reed jersey, greatest safety of all time. Baltimore Raven, obviously one of the best Ravens to ever play, I think. Um, we're going to talk about a future potential Baltimore Raven who also plays a safety position, and that's Kyle Hamilton. He is, like you said, someone who is an interesting kind of hybrid player, I would say, in today's NFL. He's big for the position. You know, he's like 6'4", 220. He carries that weight easily. He moves easily. He's someone who I think you can really question the impact of someone like that because is he a linebacker? Is he someone who's playing the box? Is he a deep safety? Um, I think in today's NFL, you have to know how you're going to use a player like that because we've seen some players come out. I want to say, was it Isaiah Simmons? Is that his name? The kid from Clemson who came out a couple years
Yeah,
back. Arizona drafted him, and I feel like they didn't really know how to play him, and he hasn't really fulfilled the potential that I think was there. I think Hamilton's a more natural safety than Simmons was, but similar body type. Um, I think there's some other players you could compare him to. Derwin James, for instance, you know, he's a guy who's kind of that hybrid safety who can play in the box. He can take away tight ends. You can be that guy who's really kind of a jack of all trades on the defense, and that's something that I can envision Hamilton doing in the NFL. I have a very high grade on him. I think he's a top 5 player for me in this draft class. I think that you know he has something that Ed Reed had, for instance. He has that instinct of a position where he knows what's happening. He's a student of the game. He sees plays developing in front of him. I mean, there's so many plays on tape where you see him like undercutting a pass or like he's breaking on a pass before it's there. He's cutting across the field to, you know, pick off a pass that hasn't like even been thrown yet. Like he just sees plays develop. And I think that's something that's underrated in the NFL is his intelligence, is that ability to kind of, you know, see plays develop, know where he needs to be, at times even bait quarterbacks into making throws that they shouldn't make because he can make it look like it's open when it's actually not going to be. I think that's the
yeah.
kind of
I saw
player.
one of those too, Gabe. I saw one of those in my games. I haven't written down which ones, but I saw him bait quite a bit and try, but he actually got one of those things. But yes, just echoing your thoughts on the angle, he knows when to take a direct angle to the football and get his hands on it, and he also knows when he can't, and he's going to kind of lay back and wait for the deflection to happen and the hand fighting to put himself in a position to make an interception on those. Something that Reed was very very good at. He just kind of felt where the quarterback was going to either overthrow it or where it could be. So he wasn't going to get caught in that position where he's rushing to the football at a natural instincts and not putting himself in a position to make a play. And yes, Hamilton's 4.7 speed, I would said, Ken, he was all over the track, almost out of the line. So he doesn't play like a 4.7 player. And of course, at safety, Gabe, instincts are the most important with how fast you actually play.
Yeah, and just to bring back Ed Reed once again, he didn't run the fastest 40 either. I think he ran like a high 4.5s. And he's smaller. He's not 220 like Hamilton is. So I think there's a difference between track speed and play speed. I think everybody who's ever like played in the NFL or watched the NFL would tell you that, like, having the pads on and being able to run fast in a straight line, two completely different things. And there might be a different urgency when you're on the football field, and like you have that adrenaline going, and you know the play that you need to make, and you get there a little faster because of that. So I'm not worried about the speed. I'm not sure he's like the single high safety that like some safeties, like you might say, like I don't know, maybe like Marcus
Jesse
Williams, for
Bates,
instance. Yeah, JC Bates. Like
Marcus Williams, yeah.
the Ravens just got Marcus Williams, so they don't need that player. They need someone who'll be complementary to him. And I think that's where a guy like Hamilton can play. He can play in the box. He could be a de facto linebacker. I think, and that gets back to what I was saying about envisioning how you're going to use a player. So I think you use him as like, you kind of have a base like nickel package basically, and he's that fifth defensive back you have in there, and you can use him with Chuck Clark. You can use him with Williams in the back, and I think that gives you a ton of versatile packages that you can play. And you can bring in another corner. You can even bring in another safety in certain packages, and it just gives you a lot of different options with what you want to do in terms of pressure packages and coverage packages. You don't have to worry about having like a linebacker like Patrick Queen like covering a tight end, because that's what we've seen. It's not working out that well. But if you put Hamilton on that tight end, that's a different story entirely.
Completely. And I think that there are better fits, obviously, more premium needs. But when you're talking about your starting secondary, if Hamilton is a piece of that, we know Chuck Clark's not leaving the field. We know Marcus Williams isn't leaving the field. We know Marlon and Marcus aren't leaving the field. So there's your four. But yes, I mean, a lot of teams are playing, the main package is 11 personnel. You're seeing a ton of 3 receivers. Sorry for stumbling over that. So you're going to need another defensive back on the field nonetheless. The only pushback I could see is like if the other team has one of these quick slot receivers, that's where Hamilton would have to play at the linebacker role, where you were saying, where maybe Queen comes off the field and helps us there. And then we would still need another DB, a cornerback, to come in. But that's not even a concern of mine, Gabe, because we're going to need cornerbacks regardless. I mean, probably looking at drafting 2, I would imagine. So with the need of DBs here. And then Hamilton also, I feel like I'm a little maybe even more confident than you when I talk about him in the back end of a defense, because I do think he plays as a single high safety. I think you can put him in the post and he'll be fine. And that will help because the versatility, true versatility, not just playing both because you have to, but being able to match up in certain situations wherever you need to be is a huge plus. So I love Hamilton, have him in my top 10. I actually have him just ahead of Stingley at this point. Those are the 2 guys I'm flipping. So Gabe, off topic subject, if Hamilton and Stingley were both there, who are you taking? Who should I have higher on my board?
That's a really good question. From a positional value, I think you say Stingley, because cornerback is that premium position. The Ravens have 2 good cornerbacks now, but Peters is playing in his last year of his contract. He's, I think, 29. He's coming off an ACL. His future with the Ravens is unclear. So I think if you can get that premium corner, you have to strongly consider that. In a vacuum, I have Hamilton rated higher. I just think he's a more consistent player. I think he's put on better tape than Stingley has. But from what the Ravens need, then you maybe go Stingley. I think it's a real good question about BPA, or best player available, versus the team's need and for current and future consideration. So that's a tough one. For me, it's really close. I would probably lean Hamilton just because I think he's I don't know if generational, it's a strong word. I think he's a very, very rare talent to come out of the college ranks. And I think the Ravens have the opportunity to put someone like that in their defense, it could be, a change that could improve the defense for years to come, especially just signing a 5-year contract to a guy like Williams and have them paired up. You have Humphrey already at cornerback. You have a really strong secondary for years if you go that route. And I'm not saying Stingley wouldn't also be a great option, but there's more concerns about him, I think, and what we've seen on tape over the past couple of years, especially.
So those guys, I believe, are both top 10. They deserve to be in that tier with the other guys. And I believe both deserve to be at the end just because of the need and the line, the edge rushers that are up there. I have all them ahead. But man, like that's a tough call that's going to come down to right before we start our show on Ken's show. Right now I have Hamilton 9, Stingley at 10, but I could easily see that switching. I asked Ken for advice. He had his own list. He had Stingley a little bit higher, so I know where Ken's heart is on that. So what about the edge rusher class though? Who's standing out to you? I know this is a group that you studied very heavily. So I'm glad to have you on. You might have seen tape I haven't seen or more games or whatever it may be. Who have you been thinking about, Gabe?
So this class I think is, I think it's known to be a deep class, but I think it's a little underrated in terms of just how deep it is and the amount of talent that's going to be available. The Ravens might be in a tricky position at 14 because it's possible that kind of the high end, high tier players might not be there at 14. They could be drafted ahead of the Ravens. But one of the guys I wanted to talk about was one of those players who has really moved up draft boards. And that's Trayvon Walker, who I've been intrigued by since I guess back in January, end of the season. Georgia was making this run for national championship, and he's one of the players who's out there like in this dominant Georgia defense. And I looked him up. I saw he's draft eligible. Kind of looked at his story. You see the athleticism of him on the field, and that's why he's really intriguing to me. And at that time, he wasn't someone who was considered a top 10, top 5 pick by most people. He was generally considered back in the first round, early second round. Maybe even a little later than that in some circles. And, I was looking at him and I saw the athleticism immediately on film, and that's really impressive. I thought he was a really good run defender. But I didn't see what I wanted to see in terms of a pass rush. I felt like he was very limited from that. So for me, he was like a similar grade than what I gave Owe last year, actually, because I felt like there's a ton of athletic potential, but there's also that raw, ability that hasn't really translated so much into like the type of film that I'm looking for at the edge rusher position. So for me, he's like a top 20 player in this class, and I think that's a lot lower than some people have him. But
yes, including me. Like I was going to ask you that. So you don't have him in that top tier. What about if the Ravens took him at 14? How would you feel though? Like what would be your emotion?
So I'm happy with that because I think the upside with him is extremely high. And I think he has a decently high floor too because he can be a dominant run defender at times. So I think, you're getting a player who's young, who's fairly new to the position. He was playing defensive tackle at Georgia before you actually cut down the weight to become an edge player for them. In their scheme, he wasn't really asked to be much of a threat off the edge. He was asked to do a lot of run defense first kind of things. There aren't that many reps where he's coming screaming off the edge. And there's a few other players who we've seen at Georgia who've had similar things. I think Jermaine Johnson transferred away for that very reason because he wasn't getting those true edge reps. And they have a scheme that's built to win championships. They don't have a scheme that's built to put players in their best possible position to highlight them for the NFL. So I think that has to be considered with Walker, but I will still like him at 14 because of that athletic potential. We saw that at the combine. He came in and put up testing numbers that we don't see very often. He's 6'5", 270 pounds, and he's moving like a safety basically. It's pretty crazy the numbers he put up. So
I understand your concern though about the actual pass rush production, the moves, that kind of thing. But even all that said, Gabe, people know how high I have him on my board at number 4, right ahead of Hutchinson because of that upside. I think that you'll be able to find more than one person on an opposing offensive line that he's way too much for. In probably in both running or average down the distance and obvious passing situations. I think you can move them all around. and I don't see bust on him. Away is an interesting comp because he does have that strength, athletic floor. Both of them share. I mean, away is a different type of testing numbers, but Walker, man, when you add in Walker's brute force, I mean, it's pretty impressive, and the way he's able to get up under people's pads and just
Yeah.
walk them back, it's pretty sickening. It's got to be a sickening feeling. I mean, to have to block him, as far as like long day at the office factor, because he's just all over you all the time. So yeah, man, we get a disagreement a little bit on the board. So I'm taking it you like Hutchinson, Jermaine Johnson, Thibodeau. What about Karlaftis? Where does George Karlaftis fit in this mix for you?
So I have Karlaftis as a little bit further down. He's probably around 25 for me on my board. I think he's a late first round player. I wouldn't actually probably have a first round grade on him. Um, I think he is bigger in size than some of these other guys coming out, and that will translate to the NFL. I don't see him have that true kind of speed or on the edge. And to bring it back to Trayvon Walker really quick. That's one of the things that I'm I don't see on Walker, and it's true for Karlaftis too. They don't win with speed, and that's okay. You don't have to have that speed in the NFL. But it kind of makes you a little bit one-dimensional when you're a pass rusher. You really have to be very good at that power kind of play. You have to be able to use your hands extremely well, use that length that you have. And I think Walker has a little more length than Karlaftis does, and Walker uses that well. I think he has that bull rush, he has that long arm that he uses. Um, Karlaftis is more of just like the juice in his legs. You can tell, and he's pretty relentless. He has that very high motor. You love to see that. But I think my concern with Karlaftis is his length isn't as great as you want. He's kind of short arms. Hutchinson is a little bit like that too. Um, and I think Karlaftis doesn't quite have that like close area agility, like that bend ability to kind of like get around angles that Hutchinson, who's similar build, maybe a little bit longer, has that ability. So that's why I'm a little down on Karlaftis, just because he put up some decent numbers, a lot of pressures. He was always active. He was getting in the backfield very, very at a very high rate. But
Yeah, to
it's
the point where they were like double and even triple teaming him,
yeah.
Gabe. I had to turn off some games and find a different game for him because I wasn't getting a fair evaluation of what he could do. They were paying so much attention to him. So yeah, I'm looking for more information even as we speak on Karlaftis, just to try to find some clean all 22 or just some TV copy
Mm.
of him. Did you get that too, or did you get a couple of clean looks enough to get a good feel of him? Or
I didn't get a lot of the TD angle, so it's a little bit harder to say when you don't have that. But I think that he has a lot going for him. I think he uses his hands well. I think he has a lot of things that'll translate. I was a little taken aback. I don't think he was a great run defender. For someone who's a little bit on the bigger side, I think you could run at him. I put on the Ohio State game, I think, and they kind of ran right at him, and he didn't seem to have a good answer in that game. So there's some games where he looked like he was unblockable, and some games where it looked like he could be blocked. So that's a little bit where I'm concerned there.
yeah, I saw a pretty advanced pass rush, but limited physical upside. If I had to like nutshell it, man,
Hmm.
like he is active with his hands. He's pretty good. I saw a swipe, I saw a cross chop, I
Yep.
saw a bunch of stuff from him. But he played 270. He's not as strong as a lot of players who are 270. You mentioned that. And then, of course, he's quicker than most guys who are 270, but that doesn't make him somebody that can burn the edge. So, safe player, yeah, I had to get your opinion since you had Walker. So you have Walker, of course, ahead of Karlaftis. I just
Hmm.
wanted to know how they fell on your board. So, what about Arnold Abacadi? Now, Haitian Sensation and I are talking about him, but I know Gabe Fergie is a big Abacadi fan. So let me hear it. And also, Gabe, in your analysis, what are the chances that this guy is there for 45? And if you'd like to address whether the Ravens would be willing to trade up, maybe even 5, 10 spots, like would you target Abacadi? Because I know you like him and his skills are obvious.
Yeah. So Ebiketie is one of my favorite players in this draft class. I I'm higher on him than pretty much anybody, I think. I actually have him graded higher than Trayvon Walker. He's my number 4 edge rusher. So if it was based off my rankings, I would say you can take him at 14. But I know that a lot of people don't have him that high, so where he goes in this draft, who knows? I think he's probably going to go the tail end of the first round from things that I'm seeing about him. But when I see him on the field, he's just consistently getting after the passer, and he doesn't have that issue where he can't get around the corner. He is beating tackles with speed. He's beating tackles with his bend, and he has probably some of the better hands that he in this class. Like one of the things that is underrated with him, I think, is his hand usage, his ability to kind of knock away offensive tackles, hands. He has a nice kind of like rip move that he uses effectively. He has really great balance through contact. He's able to kind of continue to press towards the quarterback. He'll give you a little bit of speed to power. I think that's somewhere where he can improve is his ability to bull rush. But one thing that he has that is unique for someone his size, he's only 6'2", but he has 34-inch arms. So he has that length of someone who's actually a couple inches taller than he does. So he can really extend those arms and block out offensive tackles. And I think that's something that's going to treat him very well in the NFL. And then if you just look at his agility and athletic numbers, he's very at the high end of his speed, his explosive numbers, his jumps, his 3-cone, short shuttle. Everything is there for him. He checks a lot of boxes. And I think if he was, maybe a couple inches taller and 10 pounds heavier, we'd be talking about him as a top 10 player in this draft class. I think it's a size thing that's keeping him a little bit under the radar because he's only 250, 6'2".
I'm seeing end of the first, beginning of the second, and my board kind of matches that with me having him at 28 overall with no quarterback. So, and honestly, he can move up a couple of spots. There's just a lot of great players in this draft. I mean, it's a choice what kind of rusher you want when you're talking about him or a Boye Mafe or Carl Loftus. They're all slightly different, but what's kind of attracted me to him more recently is that he does kind of fit the prototype of what the Ravens like to look for in an outside linebacker. And that's somebody that could play on either the rush end and just pin his ears back and beat a left tackle, or he profiles athletically, like you were alluding to, Gabe, as somebody who could help you in coverage, somebody that could even off ball it a little bit if you needed him to. He's rushing over here, he's rushing over there. So I like the versatility and the fact that he looks a lot like Thibodeau. Like that's why I have Thibodeau as my top edge rusher. Thibodeau's a little bit different, special speed and gets off the snap like a maniac.
Yeah.
But Abacadi has a lot of those same skills. Like he's more like a Thibodeau than he is a Hutchinson, than he is a Walker, than he is a Mafe, or than he is a Carl Loftus. So any of those other guys around him at the top, Ajabo, would fit into that kind of category. But Abacadi is much more advanced, I think, with his hands. I'm glad that you noticed that you think people are sleeping on his hand usage and like his technical skills.
Absolutely. And I think it's partly because he's really been really in the limelight for 1 year. He's a redshirt senior. Well, it's 5th year, so I think he redshirted his first year, and then he graduated from Temple, and then he transferred and was a graduate player at Penn State for that one final year, and he played, I think, just really well for that 1 year at Penn State, and that's why maybe he doesn't have quite as much hype around him because he was basically unknown going into this year. Then he comes and has 1 year where he's playing really high. So he's a little bit older. Like some of the players in this class are a little bit older. Mafe, he'll be, I think he's 23. Abacadi's 23. Jermaine Johnson also 23. That doesn't get mentioned as much. But there's a few players who, are a little bit older. Then you have guys like Walker who are 21. So you see that, maybe a couple of years of development with Walker, and you're potentially getting him at a higher level than somebody who's 23 already. So that's one of the things you have to consider is the age of these prospects. But yeah, overall, and you mentioned, could you trade back and get Abacadi, or maybe trade up in the second round and get him? I think those are both potential options for the Ravens if they really like him. You could go a different route, maybe go cornerback first, maybe go offensive line first. You already talked about Kyle Hamilton, obviously. So, there are a lot of ways that you could potentially address the edge position. But I think, if you're getting someone in the first or second round here, it's really hard to go wrong. There's a lot of players who can come in and be impactful right away. And even into the third round, you might be able to get some really good players. So it's a deep draft class at that position. I think it's perfect for what the Ravens need heading into the season.
And I was skeptical when I kept seeing Jermaine Johnson slip to us at 14. But the more I've been thinking about it, Gabe, I'm going to run this by you. It's the same reason that I'm skeptical that a receiver might be taken before us or a two receivers. The reasoning is they're so plentiful at the beginning of that second round with these teams having another pick. I'm not going to go through and tell you who has another pick at the top of the second, but a lot of these guys could pass on a Hutchinson, Walker, Thibodeau, Jermaine Johnson. I'm talking specifically about Johnson, though. They might pass on Jermaine Johnson and say, hey, man, we're just going to grab Abacadi in the second round or Mafe or whoever's there in the second round and pass on it. Same thing like the deep receiver group we have. So, just a personal aside there, Gabe, I'm getting more and more optimistic that a guy like Jermaine Johnson could actually slip to the Ravens at 14 and not put us in a position where we'd probably be best off trading back at that point if it came to it. Because, man, the meat of this draft to me, Gabe, is right from you could say end of the first is good. Yeah, I definitely think so. But definitely from second to middle of the fourth, even into the fifth round is going to be sick, bro. A lot of good players in that area.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's definitely the truth. And the Ravens are in great position to take advantage of that in this class. And whether that's by luck or by intent, I think that they did know that this is going to be a year where a lot of players are coming out who didn't have the chance to come out in the previous 2 years because of COVID. So, there's players who stayed around for extra season because of that. A lot of especially small school players who didn't come out into the NFL the past couple of years. So you have an abundance of talent in this draft. And previous two drafts have been kind of lean comparatively. So now you have an advantage or ability to take advantage of that, which I think will go really well for the Ravens. And they have the arsenal to move up if they want to. They could move back and pick up even more picks if they want to. They could potentially pick up picks in next year's draft. They have lots of options to them. But getting back to the edge class, I think that Jermaine Johnson is an interesting name because he comes in and I think does something that a lot of other players don't, and that's someone who's an immediate starter. Some of the other guys might be pass rush specialists or guys who can impact you and have a good ability, but Johnson's someone who I think can be a 3-down player for you. He's an absolute animal in run defense, probably the best edge setter in this class. He's disruptive in the run game. There are some metrics that concern me about his pass rush wins. He's low in that metric, the pass rush win rate. His wins tend to be later. They don't happen immediately. He's not winning with speed off the edge. He's more of that power kind of rusher, similar to Walker we talked about a little bit. But I think that he's someone who also plays with a very high motor, and that's something that is going to get him sacks in the NFL. And he may not be the guy who gets you 12, 15 sacks, but if he can play a solid all around 3-down role for you, be an excellent run defender and get you 8 to 10 sacks, I think that's a worthwhile investment at pick 14 for sure.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his because he's not hard to find. He's not hard to get hands on, but he's hard to do anything with, and he tends to go where he wants to go. Yep. Especially, and that shows up in the stats that you were talking about. He's not lightning fast to the quarterback. His stats indicate that, but he will go through you, and you're not going to keep him blocked. Kind of like we saw from Justin Houston last year, Gabe, which is a different type of style player. Obviously, Justin Houston is in the twilight of his career, nearing the end. But Justin Houston, it was he did it by his just technical hand use and just setting people up. It wasn't like when Jalen Ferguson or some other rushers I don't want to pick on, when they got blocked, they stayed blocked. Justin Houston did not stay blocked, so he would get those late pressures, all that kind of stuff. And I think Jermaine Johnson is consistently going to get those. And yes, on the strong side and in the run game, the best eyes in the class as far as edge defenders go. He sees it first, and he'll be able to position himself to set you up and then scoot over, be right in the ball carrier's way. So he really does a good job of leveraging himself and then just forcing himself into the run lane and making the play. He's not just setting the edge. He's setting the edge and setting that up to make a play, which is just a lot of players can't do that, Gabe. They can set the edge and they work their butts off to really just try to leverage outside, but they're not even able to get an arm on them. Jermaine's going to do that. So, man, digging more into the edge rushers, I think we have – wait a minute. Nope, we're out of edge rushers on the schedule. Man, Gabe, we really flying through. So who else have you been studying? And What else do you have for me, man? Like, I know you're a draft guy like me. What have you been
Yeah.
thinking about? What's going on?
Well, there are a lot more edge rushers we could talk about, but we don't have all day. So let's get back to the offensive line because I think there's a player who's kind of completely flying under the radar as a potential option for the Ravens, and that's Zion Johnson,
Ooh,
left guard out of Boston College. He is another player who I really really like watching on film, um, and to me he's another guy who's kind of that total package. Has everything you could look for. You can see his ability to process when he's playing, just the ability to get on the combo blocks, help out the guy next to him and get to the second level. He has a great way of sealing off defenders and using angles to kind of give his running backs lanes, and it's impressive what he can do. I think that's going to continue to be that way at the NFL level because you look at his like testing numbers and he's extremely athletic. He's a very high-end athlete. He has great size for the position, great 34-inch arms. Um, I think he could potentially play tackle in a pinch. He played tackle for Boston College a couple of seasons. Um, so, he has some of that flexibility. And then just in terms of what he would bring to the Ravens right away, you can plug him in at left guard and you turned a position that's kind of been a turnstile for them over the past several years into maybe the strongest position on the team, especially if you have Stanley next to him at left tackle. That left side of that line is stalwart now, and they can block the hell out of you. And the Ravens running game was not where we wanted it to be last year. And you put someone like Zion Johnson in there, who is one of the better run defender or run blockers I've seen coming out of college in some time at a guard position, and you turn that offensive line into a unit. And that is something that I think we have been missing since 2019. And you know, it's a lot to ask to take a first round guard. They have to be a plug and play like star right away, but I think he can be that guy.
him and Kenyon Green are both I predicted them to go into the first round, and I have them ahead of Karloftis and Linderbaum on my board, as you can see there. Even a player like Olave, and that should speak to the people who are watching the show how much I agree with Gabe and see both of those guys as versatile pieces. Kenyon Green and Zion Johnson can both move themselves, and they can both move people. If they're on a combo block, they're keeping their pads low, they're keeping their feet running, and they are going to move that guy. They both have great timing. Moving up to the second level, they're going to square people up there. They've both played tackle. So, I mean, well, Kenyon Green might end up with tackle snaps this year the way injuries and stuff happens around the NFL. I could see it. But for Zion Johnson, he actually took snaps at center at the Senior Bowl. We're snapping the ball at center at the Senior Bowl. Not sure how all that went, but just shows you his ability. And Gabe, I was talking, this is one of Michael Crawford, MC's favorite guys too. Only other time he's been brought up on the show. So I'm glad that you brought him up. I almost think that on the center part for Zion Johnson, I almost think that that would be a waste for him because he can be so dominant. Why have a dominant center when you can have a dominant guard? And you understand positional value. So with Kevin Zeitler, potentially this being his last year, I could see Zion Johnson at right guard, Gabe. And you know how important those right guards are becoming with the all-star three techs lined up right against them
Yep.
and them being able to handle them one-on-one. So Ravens fans would not love it. It would be, I would say, if we took Zion Johnson, it would be more a move for the future because who knows how he's going to work into the mix this year. But I agree with you. Would I rather have Zion Johnson or Ben Cleveland or Tyree Phillips starting tomorrow? I would choose Zion Johnson. He's just a different breed. He's talked about in this range in the first round for a reason, Gabe.
Yeah, like you said, he's a really special player. I think, I think in the first year, I mean, maybe long term, it's obviously a great, long term play for the Ravens too. But I think he upgrades the position that has been kind of lackluster, and then he turns it into a strength. And that's
Right.
something that I think would really help the line and really get that running game back to where we want it and get that pass protection back to where we want it. So Lamar Jackson isn't running after, 1.5 seconds because there's a defensive tackle in his lap or an outside linebacker in his lap coming on a blitz. I think that's one thing that Johnson does really well is one, he's really good in kind of like the games and stunts up front. He's very smart and he sees those things happening and he hands them off extremely well. He's very smooth in those transitions. He also picks up blitzers well. He's someone who's looking for work. So
Yeah, one step ahead, man. He's one step ahead of the game.
yeah, absolutely. So I think, he can come in and be an impactful player right away. And I know that long-term the Ravens fans are often concerned about offensive tackle, and there's reason for that because, Stanley's health is a little bit of a question mark. Um, I think that everything I'm hearing and seeing is that he's going to come back and be maybe not the same Stanley, but he's not going to be unhealthy this year. I think, the health concerns are behind him. Um, Right tackle, more of a question mark. Moses was signed to a 3-year deal. It's probably more like a 1 to 2 year deal.
Yeah.
So right tackle still a question mark. You might be able to address that later in this draft, though. There's some guys later you can get as kind of a developmental tackle in the 3rd, 4th round that you can have sit, develop for a year behind a Moses, maybe 2 years behind a Moses, and then have them come in and take over at that position. So I don't know if you have to take an offensive tackle early in this class. I'm not in love with like the 2nd round tackles in this class. I feel like there's guys who might be going later who might be better long term. So, and if someone like Charles Cross is off the board, which he most likely will be at 14, I don't think you can really take someone at that position. But if you can get someone who's the best guard or the top 5 guard right away and plug him in, that's something that's really going to improve your offense, in my opinion.
Well, plus, Gabe, if we're in the position more than likely to take Zion Johnson or Kenyon Green, definitely watch him. By the way, if you haven't, he's up there with Zion Johnson.
He's great.
I have them right next to each other. So if we're in a position where we take one of those 2 guys, it's in a trade back position. It's not a position we're going to take at 14, probably because of how the league views them and because there's 2 of them. So imagine, like, would you rather have Jermaine Johnson and, or would you rather have a Zion Johnson or Kenyon Green and add another player in that range? I mean, dude, maybe Abacadi. Maybe Abacadi guy. I'm sure if I gave you the choice of either having Jermaine Johnson flat at 14 or you can have Abacadi and Zion Johnson, you're going to take Abacadi and Zion Johnson. I mean, well, you are because you love Abacadi, but I think, if I'm looking at that, I'm taking it. I think most Ravens fans would take something like that. Or maybe it gets to the point where you do take a chance on a Trevor Penning if you have some confidence that you can rein him in. Or, there's other ways to address the defense too at that area. I'm a big Daxton Hill guy. Love him. The receivers there are going to be very enticing. There's going to be somebody that drops, whether it's Jameson Williams or Olave or Jahan Dotson or Pickens. So that's the sweet spot, Gabe. Like, I really feel like people are not going to like the idea of trading back. But if you put it to them like that, say, would you rather have Jermaine Johnson or 2 of the guys I had there in the green, or 1 guy in the green and 1 guy from my purple section? I think most people would take the 1 guy or the 2 guys over the 1 guy at the top.
Yeah, I think this class, and you talked about it and alluded to it, is there's a few guys who are kind of the elite guys. There's maybe, I would say, 8 or 9 who are probably, really unique elite talents. Some of the offensive tackles, top edge rushers, a couple cornerbacks, and I would probably throw Hamilton in that as well. But then after that, I think it's a pretty flat, maybe even 50 to 75 players and honestly, they could come off the board in any kind of order, and I wouldn't be too surprised if someone that you have rated 60 goes at number 25. Like, I could totally see something like that happen. It's just kind of like, what are you looking for in a player? What do you think that they're going to do on your team, and from like a scouting perspective? Or is it someone who's going to fit into like the scheme we have? And there's always those kind of things that are different from one team's, evaluation versus the other. So I agree with you. I think this is a class that if you can trade back and you can pick up an extra pick or 2 in those, top 100, maybe then you can even trade back up and get a couple guys in the top like 30, top 40 kind of situation, where you're getting somebody who's falling out of the first round, maybe get him in the top half of the second round, something like that. That just gives you a lot of options. And I think that's something that you want in this draft class.
Why I'm looking forward to draft night with you, Gabe, and Ken, the Film Study Podcast is, I could make an argument for trading up or trading back equally. I mean, it just really depends who's there. And what the prices are and all that other stuff. But like if they trade up, I'm going to be excited. If they trade back, I'm going to be excited. It's really, staying put. It seems like the most boring option to me, actually, and just taking the one player. But if we could get a Devontae Wyatt at that point, that would change things on our defense a lot. I would like that. So tons of options. Gabe, thank you so much for coming by. The barbecue means a lot. I know out there on the West Coast, the best coast. I don't know. I'm an East Coast guy, so might fight on that one. But Dr. Ferguson likes to get up early, rub it down, and put it in the smoker, bro. That's what I learned today, Gabe. That's what I learned today.
Absolutely. The trick is to rub it with some mustard first. Get the rub to stick nicely to it. It keeps it a little moist. Keep it in there for about 7-8 hours at 225. Really, really good.
So what kind of mustard though, bro?
Just a French's yellow mustard. Doesn't have to be anything
just
fancy.
a regular
Mustard. Yeah.
I was gonna say if you're covering that, I might need to get the cheap stuff over here on my budget, man.
Yeah.
The off-brand yellow mustard. Just okay. So mustard, 225, 7-8 hours. So get your butt up early. Yeah. And then what other kind of like seasoning goes on after the mustard, by the way?
There's all kinds of different rubs you can use, but generally just a bunch of like salt, coarsely ground pepper. You can use some garlic, some like if you like spicy, you can put some like cayenne in there or some like chili powder that you like. And that's pretty much it. Maybe some like cumin if you like something with a little bit more spice to it. Whatever like kind of spice thing that you like, you can really make it your own. But it's pretty much like salt and pepper is the base for it, and then you just add whatever else you want on top of that.
There you go, man. The man of many talents, Gabe Ferguson, Baltimore boy out there in California, doing well for himself. Proud of you, Gabe, and I'm really looking forward to draft night, man. So, man, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. It's going to be a lot of fun when we get to that draft. And I know we've all been waiting for it. Seems like it's never going to get here, but it's going to be an exciting weekend. The Ravens have all those picks, especially on day 3. So I think, there will be a lot of conversations around that happening before, right after too. So, maybe we can do this again after all those picks are handed in. We can discuss those.
Pre-draft shows upcoming. I have a certain famous lady that has been on the show before that I'm hoping to get back on. She had some plans this weekend with the family. So pressure if you're out there watching. But yeah, Gabe, if Abacadi goes in the top 10, I know you're going to be sitting there like, you're going to be unbearable, bro. Your head's going to be like this big. It's like, we might as well just unplug. Go ahead, Gabe. Take it away, buddy. Go ahead. Take it away. So yeah. With that, I'd just like to say thank you to my football family. Love my football family. Thanks for joining us for this series. It's been awesome just getting everybody's opinion and perspective. So, Gabe, at this time, I'd just like to say thank you and say goodbye to the people, Gabe.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Jason. It's been so much fun. Hope we do it again soon.
Yes, sir. It's coming up. We're going to get back together for sure.